Welcome back to Global Economic Brief, where we analyze the critical financial shifts and geopolitical forces shaping our modern world today. A historic storm is brewing across North America, threatening to shatter the longest-standing trade alliance in the Western Hemisphere. Donald Trump has issued a severe warning, threatening to impose a 100% tariff on all goods from Canada. This unprecedented threat has sent shockwaves through Ottawa and Washington, signaling a potential end to free trade on the continent. At the heart of this explosive conflict lies a controversial new trade agreement recently signed between the Canadian government and China. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has made a bold strategic move, opening the northern doors to the Asian economic superpower. The deal allows for a massive influx of Chinese electric vehicles into Canada, bypassing the heavy restrictions imposed by Washington. Under this new agreement, 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles will enter the Canadian market almost immediately, changing the landscape. While the United States imposes a 100% wall, Canada has set a modest tariff of just 6.1%. In exchange for accepting these vehicles, Beijing has agreed to significantly lower tariffs on Canadian agricultural products like wheat and soy. For Canadian farmers, this deal is a lifeline, offering access to the massive Chinese market that they have long desired. However, Washington views this arrangement not as free trade, but as a dangerous backdoor for Chinese goods to enter America. Donald Trump believes that Canada is effectively undermining American economic defenses by allowing China to exploit the North American free trade zone. The fear is that cheap Chinese components will flood the market, destroying the competitiveness of American manufacturing and the auto industry. This dispute brings us to the critical review of the USMCA trade agreement, scheduled for renegotiation in July of 2026. Trump is using the threat of immediate tariffs as leverage, setting the stage for a brutal renegotiation of the Continental Pact. The goal is clear: force Canada to choose a side, either align completely with American protectionism or face severe economic isolation. In Ottawa, the government faces a nightmare scenario, caught between their largest trading partner and the need for global market diversification. The economies of Canada and the United States are deeply integrated, with supply chains that cross the border multiple times daily. A typical vehicle built in North America contains parts that have crossed the border up to 7 times before final assembly. A 100% tariff would shatter this supply chain, causing immediate factory shutdowns and mass layoffs on both sides of the border. For American consumers, this trade war would mean skyrocketing prices for vehicles, fuel, and essential goods, fueling a new inflation crisis. Energy is another critical battlefield, as the United States relies heavily on Canadian oil to maintain its energy security and stability. If Canada retaliates by restricting energy exports, the American Midwest could face immediate shortages and a spike in gasoline prices. Furthermore, Canadian hydroelectric power keeps the lights on in major American cities, adding another layer of complexity to this dispute. Prime Minister Carney argues that Canada has the sovereign right to trade with whomever it chooses, refusing to be a vassal state. This conflict highlights a global trend where traditional allies are seeking autonomy and diversifying away from total reliance on the United States. Mexico finds itself in a similar position, watching closely as the outcome of this standoff will dictate their own future negotiations. The architects of American trade policy are betting that Canada's economic dependence on the U.S. will force them to eventually capitulate. With 75% of Canadian exports going to the U.S., the economic leverage Washington holds is undeniably massive and dangerous. It is a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess, where a single wrong move could trigger a recession for both nations involved. Financial markets are already reacting to the rhetoric, with investors pulling back capital from North American logistics and manufacturing sectors. Public sentiment in Canada is hardening, with citizens demanding their government stand firm against what they perceive as American bullying tactics. Social media amplifies every threat, turning diplomatic negotiations into a public spectacle that leaves little room for quiet, pragmatic compromise. Ironically, while trade wars loom, the military alliance between the two nations remains crucial for continental defense and Arctic security. A fractured relationship could weaken North American security in the Arctic, just as rivals like Russia and China increase their presence. The core of the dispute is the future of the auto industry, specifically who will control the critical battery technology supply chain. American automakers cannot currently compete with the low prices of Chinese EVs, making protectionism their only immediate survival strategy. Even industry titans are divided, knowing that while tariffs protect them, they also increase the cost of raw materials they need. Logistics companies are warning that even a threat of tariffs causes delays, as businesses rush to stockpile inventory before rules change. Legal experts are scrambling to interpret the USMCA clauses, looking for loopholes or defense mechanisms to protect cross-border commerce. Historians draw parallels to the 1930s, warning that aggressive protectionism often deepens economic depressions rather than solving domestic problems. Consider aluminum, mined in Quebec, processed in Ohio, and sold back to Montreal as a finished Ford truck. Breaking this loop destroys value at every step, making North American products less competitive globally against European or Asian rivals. The average citizen will feel the pain first, not in political speeches, but at the checkout counter of their local grocery store. Internally, Canada faces pressure as oil-rich Alberta demands appeasement of the U.S., while manufacturing Ontario fears the influx of Chinese cars. Mark Carney must navigate this internal minefield, balancing the needs of diverse provinces while presenting a united front to Washington. Beijing watches with strategic patience, knowing that any rift between the United States and its allies serves their long-term geopolitical interests. By securing a foothold in Canada, China effectively establishes a commercial beachhead in North America, regardless of U.S. tariff walls. The efficiency of Chinese manufacturing is a reality that tariffs can suppress but cannot eliminate from the global supply equation. Economists predict that a full-blown trade war could shave several percentage points off the GDP of both the United States and Canada. The Canadian dollar would likely crash, making imports more expensive for Canadians, but potentially making their exports cheaper for others. Cross-border tourism would evaporate, devastating border towns that rely on the daily flow of visitors for their economic survival. Behind closed doors, diplomats are frantically working on back-channel compromises to avoid the public implementation of these catastrophic tariffs. The technical battle will be fought over rules of origin, determining exactly how much of a product must be made locally. Tracing the origin of every microchip and screw is a logistical nightmare that could grind cross-border trade to a halt. American farmers also fear retaliation, remembering how previous trade disputes left them with rotting crops and a need for government bailouts. This is not just about cars. It is about building a fortress North America, but locking out your closest neighbor in the process. Canada's resilience is being tested like never before, forcing the nation to question its identity as a trading nation. From space, the lights of Toronto and New York blend together, a reminder that our economies are linked by geography and destiny. If pushed too far, Canada may accelerate infrastructure projects to export oil and gas directly to Asian markets, bypassing the US. Trump has shown he is willing to use executive powers to disrupt trade norms, regardless of the long-term diplomatic damage. The steel and aluminum industries, already battered by previous tariffs, are bracing for another round of devastating duties and uncertain quotas. The label "Made in Canada" is under scrutiny, with accusations that it merely masks the true origin of global components. E-commerce and small businesses that rely on cross-border shipping would face insurmountable paperwork and fees, killing the digital economy. Diplomatically, this rift weakens the G7, creating fissures in the Western alliance exactly when unity is needed against global rivals. European leaders are watching with trepidation, understanding that if Canada can be targeted, the European Union could be next. Protectionism is reshaping the world, moving us from a globalized economy to a fragmented system of regional power blocks. Headlines across the globe are capturing the anxiety as analysts try to predict the fallout of this unprecedented economic standoff. At the ground level, the shared values and friendships between Americans and Canadians are being strained by high-level political maneuvering. Ironically, the trade war could slow down the green transition, making renewable energy technology more expensive and less accessible for everyone. Canada may be forced to pivot even harder to the Indo-Pacific, seeking new alliances to balance out the volatile American relationship. While Canada's economy is smaller, its vast natural resources give it strategic leverage that Washington cannot simply ignore or bully. Critical minerals like lithium and cobalt, essential for US defense and technology, are largely sourced from Canadian mines. The Pentagon itself has warned that decoupling from Canadian supply chains would threaten American national security and military readiness. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. This conflict could leave scars on the bilateral relationship that lasts for a generation. Domestic politics often drive foreign policy, and bashing trade partners is a proven strategy to rally populist support in elections. For the Canadian leadership, the path forward is lonely and perilous, requiring wisdom to navigate between sovereignty and economic survival. As we approach the 2026 deadline, the rhetoric will only intensify, turning the trade review into a political spectacle. Global investors hate uncertainty, and many may choose to bypass North America entirely until the rules of the game are clarified. Time is running out to find a diplomatic solution before the temporary threats become permanent economic damages for both nations. The ideal of children of a common mother is being tested by the harsh realities of America first and global power shifts. The younger generation watches with concern, knowing their future job markets and economic opportunities are being gambled at the negotiating table. While politicians argue, technology marches on. Automation may eventually render low tariffs irrelevant if production costs drop low enough. In Beijing, there is quiet satisfaction, as every tariff imposed between Western allies is a strategic victory for Chinese influence. Canada is reminding the world that it is not just a neighbor to the US, but a major Arctic and Pacific power. The tariff threat is a powerful political tool, rallying a base that feels left behind by globalization and free trade agreements. Carney is rallying the business community, urging them to diversify markets and innovate, rather than just waiting for U.S. approval. Ultimately, tariffs are taxes on consumers. A 100% levy means everyday Americans will pay double for Canadian goods. From home building to newspaper printing, Canadian raw materials are the foundation of many American industries that would suffer immediately. We are witnessing a fundamental shift from an era of cooperation to an era of fierce, zero-sum competition in North America. Texas refineries, specifically designed for heavy Canadian crude, would struggle to find alternative supplies quickly without massive financial losses. The predictability that businesses crave is gone, replaced by a volatile environment where policy changes happen with a single tweet. The fabric of the North American alliance is being stretched to its breaking point, and it remains to be seen if it snaps. Historians may look back at this moment as the beginning of the end for the unified North American economic bloc. Canada may look east across the Atlantic, strengthening ties with the European Union to offset the loss of American trade volume. When the dust settles, the economic landscape may be permanently scarred, with higher prices and lower growth for both nations. It is a clash of ideologies. Carney's globalist diversification versus Trump's nationalist protectionism, with the fate of millions hanging in balance. The global trade map is being redrawn in real time, and North America is currently the epicenter of this seismic shift. For the worker on the factory floor, this is not abstract geopolitics. It is a direct threat to their livelihood and family. Investments in the future, like battery plants, are being paused as capital flees to safer, more predictable jurisdictions. Canada's strategy is clear: survive the American pressure by opening as many other doors as possible in the global market. Inside the White House, advisors debate whether the tariff threat is a bluff or a genuine policy shift towards isolationism. Border cities like Windsor and Detroit, which function as a single economic unit, would become the ground zero of this economic war. The Ambassador Bridge alone carries more trade daily than the entire U.S. trade with many nations, highlighting what is at stake. Tariffs are often described as a weapon that recoils, hurting the shooter as much as the target through higher costs. Economic nationalism is rising in Canada too, with campaigns urging citizens to buy local and shun American products in retaliation. The tariff dispute is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath lies a deeper struggle over national sovereignty and global alignment. Diplomatic niceties are fading, replaced by a raw, transactional approach to international relations that leaves no room for friendship. As darkness falls on the current chapter of the North American relations, both nations must prepare for a difficult and uncertain dawn. Meanwhile, the Chinese electric vehicles continue to arrive, a tangible sign that Canada has charted its own independent course. For Trump, seeing Chinese technology on North American roads is a provocation that demands a swift and overwhelming American response. The continental drift is no longer just geological. It is political, economic, and potentially permanent if cooler heads do not prevail. From electric vehicles to oil pipelines, every sector is now a pawn in this high-stakes game of political dominance. We are left to wonder, is this the new normal for North America, or can the historic alliance be saved? Only time will tell if the sun will rise on a renewed partnership or set on the era of free trade. Canada stands at a crossroads, determining whether to bow to pressure or forge a brave new path in the global economy. The United States remains firm, prioritizing its own industries and security, regardless of the cost to its closest traditional allies. Despite the political storms, the people of these two great nations remain connected by history, family, and shared democratic values. All eyes are now fixed on July 2026, the date that will determine the economic destiny of the North American continent. The stakes have never been higher, and the margin for error has never been slimmer in this complex geopolitical drama. Thank you for watching Global Economic Brief. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on this developing story.